Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by. The FHA Appraisals webinar is now beginning. I would now like to turn the webinar over to our host, Mr. Steve Mayers. Please go ahead.
Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar on FHA appraisal inspection requirements. I'm Steve Mayers, and I'll be your host for today. But before we get started, I'm going to review some of the features of our webinar technology and cover some general housekeeping items. First, if you're having any technical issues with the audio or video or the slides stop advancing, the easiest way to fix the problem is to simply refresh your internet browser, and that should resolve any issues you have with those two items. If the refresh doesn't work, you have a couple of options. During the first 30 minutes of the webinar, we'll have a help desk representative available to answer your questions. All you have to do is click on the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen just below the slides. A small window will open, and then you can type your question, and tech support will respond. After the first 30 minutes, click on the Help button and scroll down to the area that says Tech Support. Click on that button, and it will provide tech support information as well as provide you with an opportunity to send a message to our tech support team. Please submit policy-related questions by clicking on the Ask a Question button, type the question in the window, and then click the Submit button. But we ask that you please not submit case-specific questions. Those types of questions should be routed through the FHA Resource Center at 1-800-225-5342. That's 800-225-5342. And if you'd like to get a copy of today's PowerPoint deck, click on the Supporting Material button. A training survey evaluation will pop up when you close the webinar link. Please take a couple of minutes to evaluate today's webinar. We always value your feedback, and we find it useful in improving the quality of future webinars. And I thank you in advance for your participation. This webinar will be archived and can be accessed two ways. First, we have a quick access option that will allow you to view the webinar 2 hours after the end of today's presentation. You can access it by going to the same registration link that you used to register for this webinar. Just click on the link and it will take you directly to the archived presentation. If you did not previously register, please do so, and then you will be redirected to the archived webinar where it can be downloaded for viewing. Second, FHA has an extensive webinar archive library where this particular webinar will be stored along with some other recent webinars. And at the end of the presentation, I'll push out that link and two others that you may wish to bookmark. You'll receive these links as long as your pop-up blocker is disabled. However, if your pop-up blocker is turned on, the link will not be viewable on your screen, so you'll need to disable the pop-up blocker. And that concludes the technology overview. We will now start with the webinar. On behalf of HUD and FHA, I would like to welcome you to our webinar, FHA Appraisal Inspection Requirements, as presented by the Philadelphia Homeownership Center. It is my pleasure to welcome our presenters, Bill Howland and John Spina. Bill and John are appraisers in the Processing and Underwriting Division. Bill, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Steve. Today we're going to talk about the FHA appraisal inspection requirements. The purpose of the requirements are to note those repairs or items that are necessary to protect and ensure the health and the safety of the occupants of the properties, to maintain the structural soundness of the property, and to preserve the security of the property. Some of the objectives that we will cover today include special considerations regarding new construction, unique homes, and unusual conditions. These objectives will relate to all the four appraisal forms: the 10004 URAR, the 10004C Manufactured Housing Form, the 1073 Condominium Form, and the 1025 2 to 4 unit properties. Some of the topics that we will cover with these inspection requirements, including the exterior dwelling inspection, the interior dwelling inspection, what to look for when performing a site analysis, the external influences, comparable inspection requirements, and analyzing and reporting the sale and transfer history of the subject and the comparable properties. Towards the end of the presentation, we will give you a list of resources that will be valuable for completing your FHA appraisal inspections. We will refer you to a site that has frequently asked questions, and we will answer your questions as they come. In regards to the exterior dwelling inspection, one of the key issues is the foundation. Some of the factors to look for in looking at the foundation include evidence of foundation failure, cracked masonry, windows and doors that are not square, and shifting of the foundation. Also look for any signs of previous repairs or of previous jacking of the foundation. Notice if the grading is towards the dwelling itself, and whether or not the property has gutters and downspouts. Insufficient gutters and downspouts and the grading towards the property cause water to accumulate, which would weaken the foundation. Some other structural issues and signs of failure include cracks in the mortar or supporting walls and signs of prior foundation repair. Here are some examples of foundation deficiencies. We could see a shifting foundation on this property right here, and it's definitely not level. Another shifting foundation is shown as it came off its base. Also, we want to make sure that it's an FHA requirement to look at the entire property. And the reason for that is because not everything is obvious from the street. So part of the FHA appraisal protocol is to inspect the entire property and to observe all deficiencies. When it comes to the photographs, all sides must be photographs of the subject property. Usually 2 photos will do the trick at opposite angles. If not, take additional photos. A street scene is required, and on new construction, a photograph of the grading must be included. Photograph requirements are in the revised Appendix D, page D13. Also, photographs that may enhance the property, that are beneficial views, they should be noted. This will support any adjustments that you might be making for the view of the property. And don't forget to also photograph any negative influences. Heavy traffic, power plants, tractor-trailer storage facilities. It's best to report and analyze the effect on the subject's marketability of all exterior influences on the property. Also, don't ignore anything that might be a negative. With today's resources, such as Google Earth, we're able to spot large tracts of land or incompatible land uses next to the subject's property. In looking at the property itself, in addressing the crawl space, a minimum of a head and shoulders inspection of the crawl space is required. What we'd like to see is a recommended height of 18 inches, and that would be for adequate maintenance and repair of any utilities that might be under the subject property. And it's probably a good idea to note if there's any type of supply lines or heating ducts in that crawl space area. Also look to see whether or not the support beams are intact. Look for any dampness or ponding of water. Significant ponding or accumulation of water in the crawl space may require the need for a vapor barrier in that area. And also check to see that there are vents for adequate ventilation in the crawl space. Here's an example of a deficient crawl space area with worn or deficient joist on the property. to observe all areas of the crawl space for rot, maybe some sort of infestation, or simply just poor workmanship that might be observable in that area. When it comes to the dwelling inspection itself, the subject property is to be sketched, showing the dimensions and all exterior buildings and amenities and features, such as patios, decks, garages, storage areas. Areas such as patios and decks should be noted if they're covered or uncovered, and the calculations to determine the GLA for the subject property should be included in the appraisal report. Again, the specific requirements are in Revised Appendix D, page D-13. Any evidence of the frayed or atypical wiring that might be unusual should be noted. Also, any issues regarding failing chipping or peeling paint are to be identified and a requirement to be corrected. These areas are known as defective paint surfaces, and the cutoff date, which is 1978, anything before 1978, repair of the defective paint surfaces is mandatory. After 1978, any exterior areas of the property that are unprotected require correction to prevent any further deterioration from the elements on the exterior. And also doing your exterior inspection, be observant of the roof surfaces. A 2-year life expectancy is required for the roof. If it is questionable, an inspection should be required. Check for any signs of roof failure, and any flat or unobservable roof should be inspected thoroughly on the inside of the property by looking at the ceilings and noting any previous or current stains, and the results of your inspection should be indicated within the appraisal report. The electrical box should be examined and reported as to the type of service, whether or not it's circuit breakers or fuses. The electric panels should be sufficient to handle the appliances in the dwelling. An updated home with new kitchen appliances should have an updated service panel to accommodate the added load. In doing the interior dwelling inspection, also note any remodeling and be specific about recent improvements. In the UAD format, this would be indicated by the condition between C1 and C6. But it's also good to specify the type of improvements and renovations that have been made to the property. The effective age of the subject should be consistent with the condition, the actual age, and the improvements and updates made to the property. Also note any obsolescence to the property. Physical obsolescence would be that which would be consisting of deferred maintenance, also your lead-based or defective paint. Functional obsolescence would be those items that would be a little bit in common in the property, or the property is underserved. For example, an 8-bedroom home having 1 bathroom, having walk-through bedrooms, bedrooms without closets. Any floor plan that exhibits functional obsolescence should be sketched and included in the appraisal report. The mechanical systems, such as the heating system, must be operational and tested to see that they operate properly. A furnace or a central air conditioning system should not be turned on if it's going to cause damage to the unit. Locate the plumbing system to observe any signs of failure or insufficient water flow or leaking traps that might damage the property. And regarding the electrical system, a representative number of outlets and switches should be tested in each room. If the utilities or the water are turned off or the home is vacant and has been winterized, requirement would be made to have those systems re-inspected when those systems are reactivated and made operational. That means your appraisal would be done subject to the reactivation of those systems. In regards to bedrooms within the interior of the subject, proper egress is required. So that someone must be able to leave the bedroom without going through another room. There must be an exit to the exterior of the property. Closets in a bedroom are not required. However, the appraiser should recognize it and determine any effect on the marketability of the subject for lack of closets within a bedroom. Bars on bedroom windows must have the quick release latch and meet the local codes. Bars, safety security bars on other windows in the dwelling should be installed in accordance with the local jurisdiction or the fire department to ensure they comply with the local guidelines. Again, all interior spaces and rooms of the subject property must be inspected, including the attic area, and a minimum of a head and shoulders inspection of the entire space is required, and it is recommended that pictures be taken of the attic and also the crawl space areas. When it comes to a basement, the entire basement perimeter and the floor should be inspected, and you want to look for signs of failure within the basement, cracked walls, or any type of water damage. Other items to look for within a basement include signs of mold or excessive moisture. Within the property itself, signs of cracked walls or ceilings should be observed and noted in the appraisal report. And any type of creative construction techniques should require inspection if it's doubtful whether or not they are acceptable to the local municipality or would be acceptable to FHA. Different types, a lot of do-it-yourselfers come up with some unique ideas in putting, in making shortcuts in doing their repairs or improvements to the property. And here's a couple more coming up regarding some electrical issues. And then some plumbing issues. And obviously, there's something where the gutters have been put holes in the gutters to allow for drainage, which of course would damage the foundation. So that's definitely a sign of a defective condition on the property. And another creative technique is you want to make sure that the lights go on when you're taking a shower. That's why there's a motion detector with a light inside the bathroom shower.
There you go.
So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to John, who will start with site analysis.
Thank you, Bill. The next segment of our presentation will deal with site analysis. First, dealing with external exterior influences and obsolescence, such as gas stations, dumps, landfills, industrial and commercial uses. It's also noted that agricultural use within a quarter mile and hazardous materials and smokes and fumes and offensive noises and odors. And you would also note any presence of ponds, of liquid pits, ponds, lagoons, stressed vegetation, stained soils or pavements, drums and odors. This is an example of a septic tank on the site. It should be noted in your appraisal. Also, part of your site analysis is walking the property and looking for any signs of failing septic on the property. Okay. Question we get a lot about is the appraiser required to report well, septic, and property line distances? In the past, you had to, but now you do not have to. However, the appraiser is not required to sketch the distances, but should be aware of the distances and, if discernible, comment on them. Requesting a copy of the survey is recommended to make sure that it meets our property requirements. The distances, when it comes to well and septic, is the property line should be 10 feet. The septic tank should be 50 feet. The absorption drain field should be 100 feet from the well. Any seepage pits should be 100 feet, and the absorption bed should be 100 feet from the wellhead. Part of your site analysis also includes the individual water and supply and sewage systems. Report on the availability to connect to public or community systems. This should be noted in your addendum and whether or not a hookup is available at that time. Water and sewer systems, the lender determines the feasibility of the hookup using a 3% rule, which would be 3% of the appraised value. Common question we get is a well located within the foundation walls of a dwelling acceptable? For new construction, it is not acceptable except in Arctic or subarctic regions. For existing construction, it is acceptable but must comply with the local jurisdiction and be permitted. Again, you should comment in your addendum on where the location of the wellhead is. Further on your site analysis is dealing with site hazards and nuisances. Note evidence and existence of operating and abandoned oil gas wells and a distance from the subject. For existing construction, the distance should be 300 feet from an active or proposed drilling site boundary, not the actual well site itself. For new and proposed construction, it should be 75 feet from an operating well. For an abandoned well, it should be 10 feet with a letter from the state authority and 300 feet without a letter. Again, this is something that you should be commenting in your addendum. Site hazards and nuisances. Proximity to high-pressure gas lines. Dwelling and related improvements may not be located less than 10 feet from a pipeline easement boundary. That is in Handbook 4150.2 in Section J. Propane tanks used for heating purposes are acceptable, but they must be at a safe distance from the dwelling and cannot be located in the crawl space. So you should check with the local authorities to see what the codes are and whether or not that particular propane tank meets the local codes. Again, you should comment in your addendum as to whether or not these propane tanks meet the local codes. Site hazards, for other site hazards and nuisances would be at unacceptable locations due to environmental contaminants, noxious odors, offensive sites, and excessive noises. Once again, you should comment in your addendum if any of these are present, and also take a picture. Positive and negative influences, you should provide photographs. Things like golf courses, green belts, gas stations, railroads, freeways, hazardous waste sites, and any other positive or negative influence that is noted from the site. Comparable inspections. Comparable sales must be photographed by the appraiser. This is part of your scope of work. The use of MLS or multiple listing service photos to exhibit comparable condition at the time of the sale is acceptable. However, the appraiser must also include their photos to document compliance with their scope of work, that they did drive by the comparable and did an external inspection. This, you can find this guideline in the HUD Handbook 4150.2 in Appendix D. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to my Bill here, who will talk about minimum property standards.
FHA has two types of requirements. Minimum property standards, known as the MPS, which are applicable for new construction, and the minimum property requirements, the MPR, which are applicable to existing construction. When it comes to code compliance, the appraiser is not a code enforcer. However, they should look for signs of failure or faulty construction on the property. The appraiser is not responsible for enforcing or interpreting the local codes. Properties that have party walls or zero lot lines, on the subject property, the party wall must be constructed from the bottom of the basement to the top of the roof. So we're talking about a solid wall that separates the adjoining dwellings from the floor of the basement all the way through the ridge of the roof. So you shouldn't be able to go into the attic and crawl through a little cubby hole and inspect your neighbor's attics. There has to be solid walls from the roof down to the bottom of the foundation. In a homeowners association, the party walls are usually covered, but it may be necessary to have a party wall agreement. Also, there must be adequate space between buildings to permit maintenance. There is no set number or guideline. However, know what the trend is in your specific market area. The space depends on market acceptance for that particular area. Private roads and maintenance. The private streets must be protected by a permanent recorded easement, or they can be owned and maintained by a homeowners association. A shared driveway must be protected by a recorded permanent easement also, and a maintenance agreement is no longer required. The Code of Federal Regulations governs the determination of a high ratio FHA loan because it depends on the stage of construction. New construction is broken down into three different categories. There's proposed, there's under construction, and there's existing less than 1 year old. There's a slide that has some trenches dug, but this slide denotes proposed construction because the definition of proposed construction is any site preparation work that has been made. If we look at the next slide, there's some concrete, these are forms, I'm sorry. Forms in the ground represent proposed construction, and now the next slide will show some concrete in the footers, which represents under construction. So the property transitions from proposed construction to under construction once some type of permanent construction material has been put in place to the subject property. required exhibits that the appraiser needs would be the builder certification of the plans, the specs, and the site analysis. This is HUD form 92541. The lender would be responsible for obtaining the builder's warranty, the building permit, and the certificate in occupancy, or the 3 compliance inspections. The lender is also responsible for obtaining the wood infestation report. And regarding the builder certification, the appraiser should have that prior to doing the appraisal, and it should be signed and dated no more than 30 days before the appraisal is completed. The lender is also responsible for getting any water analysis or septic reports where it's necessary. And if the appraiser is doing the property when it is 100% complete, then the appraisal serves as the final inspections, and the lender, again, must obtain the termite forms and the builder's warranty and any well analysis and septic reports for the subject property. John will now take the next section.
Thank you, Bill. The next part of our presentation will be dealing with the Manufactured Housing Report, Form 1004 SIG. Some of the housing resources for manufactured housing include the Resource Center at 1-800-FHA. You can also email answers@hud.gov, handbooks, or your 4150.2 Appendix D, the Permanent Foundation Guide for Manufactured Housing, the Institute for Building Technology and Safety, IBTS, and the Mortgagee Letter 2009-16. Here are some of the differences between manufactured homes and modular homes. Manufactured homes are constructed to comply with the federal manufactured home construction and safety standards, while modular homes, or also known as factory built, are constructed to comply with the state codes and the Uniform Building Code, UBC, or the International Residential Code, the IRC. Manufactured housing for FHA mortgage purposes must comply with all regulations. First, the home must have been built after June 15, 1976. Any homes built prior to that are not acceptable. Never at another location. There would be at least 400 square foot living area. 5B, classified as real estate. Also, a licensed local engineer must certify the foundation system is in compliance with the Permanent Foundation Guide for Manufactured Housing. And if used as a model home on the dealer's lot, that's okay. If it has been moved from the dealer's lot to a storage facility, that is not acceptable. Here are some examples of the labels that help distinguish the manufactured home from a modular home. The one on the top left is for your manufactured home, the common red plate, while the bottom right is your silver plate for modular construction. Here is also an example of your HUD certification label number and the serial numbers. What to look for when you're looking for on the data plate is the manufacturer's serial numbers or VIN numbers. Also looking for the HUD certification label numbers, the manufacturer's name, model, date of manufacturer, wood, roof load, and thermal zones. Also, typically, the HUD data plate is adjacent to the electric service panel, the utility room, or within a cabinet in the kitchen. Copies of the data plate are generally available from the manufacturer or the implant inspection agency. Common question we get about manufacturing homes is, can the appraiser continue if the data plate is missing? Yes, but the appraiser must report to the lender if the data plate is not attached. Next, we're going to talk about some HUD certification label, that red label that you will find on the outside of the manufactured home. The certification label is also known as the HUD seal, the HUD tag, HUD label, and it must have the HUD certification label affixed to the tail light end of each transportable section. If it is a 2x4-inch aluminum plate permanently attached to the home, located at one end of each section of the home, approximately 1 foot up from the floor and 1 foot in from the side. If it is missing, note it in your appraisal and have the lender contact the IBTS. Here is a picture of a close-up label of the HUD certification label. On the frame of the manufactured home is the serial number. If it's available, you should report it in the addendum. Acceptable skirting for a manufactured home. FHA requires a properly enclosed crawl space with a continuous perimeter enclosure of a permanent type of construction. For example, block concrete or brick. Here's an example of a full perimeter foundation that is acceptable type of skirting for a manufactured home. All 1004C appraisal reports should be completed subject to a required inspection by a licensed engineer certifying the foundation is in compliance with the Permanent Foundation Guide of Manufactured Housing. There are only two exceptions to this rule, and that is if it's a HUD REO property and an FHA streamlined refinance. Okay, what happens if you're appraising a single family home with a manufactured house on the subject site? There's two things you should be aware of here. First of all, is it used for storage or is it occupied? If the manufactured home is being used for storage and is not in compliance with FHA requirements, does not pose a health or safety issue by its continued presence on the property, is in compliance with the regulations of the local jurisdiction, and does not function as a living unit, then the property can be eligible for an FHA-insured financing, assuming all other site and property improvements are in compliance with FHA standards. If the appraiser places value on a manufactured home, the value can only be a contributory value as a storage or an accessory building and not as a living unit. If the manufactured home is used as a living unit and is not in compliance with FHA requirements, the property is not eligible for FHA insurance financing unless the manufactured home is removed from the property. At this point, I'd like to turn it back to Bill to talk a little bit about HUD REO properties. Bill?
Thanks, John. REO appraisal requirements are the same as for other property types, except for the following. The assignment type should be noted as other HUD real estate owned REO. REO properties are to be appraised as is. All the required exhibits of a typical appraisal plus a copy of the property condition report is required in the file. Also required are interior photographs of all rooms, including the basement, the attic, and the crawl space. And photographs of significant damage or repair items are required. So it's best to document the appraisal as much as possible with the photos. In doing an REO appraisal, the intended use is for an estimate of the as-is market value in order to provide a basis for determining the list price of the property so it can be properly marketed. Or the intended use for an REO appraisal is to support the financing of the property with a 203B financing. Required on an REO appraisal is a statement of insurability. This ends up in one of three different categories. First is that the property is insurable. This meets MPR standards. Secondly, it could be insurable with escrow. This means that there can be repairs, but the repair total will be less than $5,000. Third, the property will be considered uninsurable. This occurs when the repair estimates exceed $5,000. When it comes to utilities, if the utilities cannot be turned on or are not turned on, the appraisal must be completed without the utilities turned on or the mechanical systems functioning. The appraiser must include the information provided in the property condition report, the PCR, and refer to the PCR in the appropriate sections of the appraisal report. HUD will only order a lead-based paint evaluation for REO properties constructed before 1978 and purchased with FHA insured financing. And in regards to manufactured housing, an engineering certification regarding the foundation compliance is not required in the loan file or the insuring binder. Once again, on an REO appraisal, the statement of insurability should be noted in bold font in the comment section of the appraisal report, and the appraiser should note the repairs necessary along with the cost to cure to bring the property into compliance with FHA's minimum property requirements. A little bit about 203K appraisals. The 203K program can be used to purchase and repair and renovate a property. It also can be used to refinance the same type of property. The appraiser would be completed as repaired once all the proposed rehabilitation and improvements are complete. So in that regard, the appraisal would be completed subject to the 203K work write-up. Additionally, the lenders may request an as-is value in the same report or a separate URAR. And when doing the appraisal, the appraiser should have the 203K work write-up that is completed by the 203K consultant for the proposed work to be done. And the appraiser must also inspect the property for any conditions that would be required to comply with the minimum property requirements. Any health, safety, structural issues should be added to the improvement plan, and the lender should reconcile the appraiser's recommendations with the 203K work write-up. For 203 properties that don't have any structural issues, the 203K Streamline program is available. Once again, it would be used for non-structural repairs, and it can have repair items maxing out at $35,000. An example of what can be done with the 203K program, on the left you have the good old boy frat house, and if you use the 203K program, you could turn it into that lovely Cape Cod Victorian. Regarding condominium appraisals, condominium projects must be on the FHA approved condominium list. We have something in the Philadelphia Home Ownership Center that are prevalent in Michigan that are called site condominiums. The site condominiums do not have to be approved. Site condominiums have their own specific definition, and per the mortgagee letter 2011-22, the site condominiums are to be appraised on the condo appraisal form, which is the Fannie Mae 1073. Manufactured housing condo projects are now eligible. Once again, those type of projects must be approved by FHA. Now John will take over some special considerations. Back to you, John.
All right, thank you, Bill. We're going to talk a little bit about special consideration. Dealing with your unique properties such as dome, earth, berm, and log homes, it should be noted in your appraisal as to its market acceptability for these type of homes. Are there similar homes in this area? And are there comparables that help support the values and the marketability of these type of special homes? Other special considerations are off-the-grid solar homes and wind-powered homes. Again, once you have to look at your market acceptability and whether or not there's other type similar homes in the area. I'll talk a little bit here about your 2 living units versus your accessory dwelling unit. 2 living units versus the accessory dwelling units are your ADUs. ADU is defined as a habitable living unit added to, created within, or detached from a single-family dwelling. ADUs should be subordinate in size, location, and appearance to the primary unit and may or may not have separate means of ingress or egress. Your ADU is commonly known as your mother-in-law suite. Determination is made by the appraiser considering the zoning, the highest and best use, and the legal use. And if an ADU is rented, it should not necessarily or categorically result in determining that it is a 2-unit. Again, in your addendum, you should be commenting on the ADU and why you would consider it to be such. Common question we get about accessory dwelling units is that if there is a separate electric meter, does it become a 2-unit property? The answer to that is that an accessory dwelling unit may or may not have separate electric service. The appraiser will make the determination of whether or not an ADU is a second dwelling. Next slide here is about appraiser roster updates. It's the appraiser's responsibility to update his or her appraisal certification in the system in order for us here at HUD to have your proper information. In addition to your technical know-how and to maintain status on the roster, you should have certain administrative responsibilities in keeping your personal and business information up to date in FHA Connection. You must establish an FHA Connection user ID to administer your record on the roster. However, you must ensure that your name is on the roster with active status before requesting the user ID. If you were licensed before October 1st, 2009 and want to upgrade your status to certified, you must reestablish your user ID. To successfully process your request to update your information, your license number must exactly match the Appraisal Subcommittee National Registry. Please review the ASC information first and wait at least a day after any corrections to ensure FHA Connection have received all corrective changes. To update your personal and business information once you have an FHA Connection user ID, you should follow the steps that are listed here in the presentation. You should go to the FHA Connection at the website that's listed on the presentation slide. Enter your FHA Connection user ID when asked for your username, and then enter your password and click Sign On. select ID Maintenance from the menu bar at the top of the page. Click Appraiser Roster, change your information as needed, and click Send. After updating, you will be allowed to attach the PDF version of your state-issued certification if it is needed. The ability to upload a scanned copy only appears if you changed the expiration date or if you add a state certification that is not already listed. You do not need to upload a certification if your information already matches the appraisal subcommittee. And here's a picture of the web page that you would do this at. Some of the appraiser resources that you have and should be part of your reference library, which will greatly help you when doing your appraisals. Handbooks that you should have in your reference library include the 4150.2 Valuation Analysis from June of 99, the 4150.1 Revision 1 from 1990, the 4145.1 Revision 2 Architectural Processing and Inspections Handbook, the 4905.1 Revision 1 Requirements for Existing 1 to 4 Family Units, and the 4910.1 Appendix K. I should note that the Appraiser Handbook, the 4150.1 and .2, presently there is a new version being updated, the 4150.3. It is available in the draft form right now for questioning by the public. Other appraiser resources include mortgagee letter, the following mortgagee letters. Mortgagee letter 09-16 for manufactured housing guidance. Mortgagee letter 2006-33 for new construction. Mortgagee letter 2005-48, very important mortgagee letter. FHA repair and inspection requirements for existing properties and revisions to the FHA Appraisal Protocol. This is where you find your Appendix D. Also, mortgagee letter 2002-25, which deals with the minimum distant requirements between private wells and sources of pollution for existing properties. Lastly, the Resource Center is available at 1-800-CALL-FHA, 1-800-225-5342. Knowledge base has a lot of questions, frequently asked type questions. If you want to step back one step here, you should join the listserv for updates to the mortgagee letters. Again, this is available on our website. Other appraisal resources, going back to the previous slide, or next slide, are your knowledge base at www.hud.gov/answers, the Resource Center at www.hud.gov, and emails. You can email us at answers.hud.gov. At this point, I'd like to thank everyone for listening to our presentation. And now I'll turn this back to Steve.
All right. Thank you, John. And in closing, I want to thank Bill and John and their support team, and especially you, the audience, for participating in today's webinar. In just a few seconds, I will begin pushing out links that you can bookmark. But before then, I want to mention that the presentation team has, last count, answered 31 questions that were submitted electronically. So if you go back and click on the Answered Questions button, you will be able to see those questions and answers. And if you need more time to view those, again, you can go back and look at this when it's archived, which will be as soon as 2 hours from the end of the presentation. Again, it was just 31 questions, so you'll probably find a lot of questions answered, and I highly suggest you go back and look at those. Also, I'm going to push out some URLs that you may find very helpful. You can bookmark those. First up is going to be the FHA FAQ. John just alluded to that a few seconds ago. That's the FHA knowledge base webpage. It's a very helpful repository of over 1,500 frequently asked questions, and it's available 24/7. And you can search it by keyword and by category and subcategory Again, I think we're nearing 1,600, so it's quite a valuable resource, and I highly recommend you look at that and become familiar with it. And next up, I'm going to push out is the FHA lenders webpage. That's HUD.gov/lenders. Again, HUD.gov/lenders, and that you can find information that's updated on a regular basis. It has program information that's of great interest to the lending community. And again, we do keep that updated on a regular basis, so I suggest you check it very frequently. I'll give you a couple seconds to copy that or bookmark it. Okay. And last but not least is going to be FHA's archived webinar webpage. And again, you will be able to find this. It'll probably be a couple days before you find it on this site. However, if you do want to look at it sooner, you can go within 2 hours. You can go back to your original registration link and view it once again. And on behalf of everyone at HUD and FHA, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us. It's been our pleasure spending this time with you. I hope you have a wonderful day, everybody, and goodbye.